Hi, I'm Sally Manning. This is the final part of a 5-part series for those who have never painted in watercolor before. This video will cover different brushes and brush strokes followed by a time-lapse painting that will be a culmination of everything that we've learned in this series. Firstly, we're going to talk about round brushes, and my favorite round brush is a number 16 round from Silverbrush, and it's called a black velvet. There are many different sizes and they've recently brought out a 20, but for a beginner you probably don't want to start with such a large brush. That might feel a little daunting. I would start with a number 12. You can try the 16 because it has a very nice point, but I wouldn't perhaps use the 20. The smallest I use is about a number 8, and for very little work I tend to use this one. Is called a monogram liner, and this would be for signatures. And then this one is called a rigger or a script liner, and it has very long bristles, and this one I'll show you the strokes for that one. Why use a round brush at all? If you're starting off painting in a small shape, you can get into the nooks and crannies with the round brush, whereas a flat brush you might have more difficulty. And you can use, of course, the very tippy point, and if it has a good point, the brush, you can do very small detail. And then you can also use the belly of the brush by using it on that side and holding it overhand. Or if you prefer, hold it further back and you can use it that way. Firstly, we're going to talk about linear strokes, and there are 3 different ways you can do this. Obviously, there's a very horizontal stroke, and it's very good practice to do those so that you can do them regularly. Make sure you do the one vertically and also obliquely. You can increase the pressure. Hi, doggy. And the more pressure you put down, the wider the stroke. So here I've got some other examples that I've already done. If we look at this section here, those are the ones where you are increasing the pressure. This is a broken linear where you do more like a Morse code, and it can read like water, or you can turn it this way and it could even read as a tree trunk. Practice doing it with very, very small strokes. This is a number 8 round, and then if you hold it overhand you'll get a straight line on one side and wiggly on the other, and as your brush runs out you'll get into dry brush. For curvilinear strokes, it's much the same as linear, but obviously they're curved. And it's also, again, good practice to do strokes that are repetitive, but with variation. Oh, these ones aren't very curved, are they? So there we go, and you can even do some smaller ones, but just practice the repetition. The one I like the most is the broken curvilinear, and these create a nice little set of rocks by the seaside and are quite effective. For scumbling, which is the next stroke, I'm using the belly of the brush, and you are literally just gliding over the tops of the paper. And it's this action, although the technique is actually what's called dry brush, and this could even create yourself a little tree. And I'll be demonstrating more of that when I get to the end of the video. It has different varieties depending on which part of the brush you're using in terms of its strokes. So here's some examples, not this little bit. So here's me doing the tree I was just showing you. And then you can even use a liner or a script to make those thin lines for the tree. And then on the top of that, to suggest those small twigs, it was done with a round bristle brush because it doesn't hold very much water and you get a very, very light effect. And this is scumbling done right on the very tip of the brush. It's almost a scribble stroke, and this created a little cone on a pine tree. This stroke is called a dabbed stroke, and you use a little bit of belly, but mostly the tip, and I'm creating a blue center of a flower. Can you see I'm sort of rocking my brush and that will read, it could read as a little bush, it could read as some grasses, fur, a number of things. And here are a couple of examples I've done. Here I used a slightly bigger brush, so it's got a bigger dab stroke, and some of them have connected, so it made a little tree. Here I've done dabbing with a bigger brush and used a bit more of the belly, so they're longer strokes, and it could be the center of a daisy, for example. For the tick and flick stroke, as I call it, and it follows this particular stroke. In America it's called a check mark, but in England it's called a tick. And it's this part of the stroke that's actually going to be important. So for creating grasses, I'm holding my brush really quite upright and creating, these would be pretty heavy duty ones. So the best way to do thinner grasses is to use your rigger, and I use my little pinky or little finger as a tripod, and this is how I create those strokes. They could obviously be fur, eyelashes, and you need to be able to do them downwards too. So if I do a couple, so if this is a grass stroke and then we do one coming down, it looks like that grass stroke is just bent over at the top. So that's with the rigger, or it's also called a script liner. That was a number 4. What looks good with these grasses, if you actually want to make it look like it's behind a little hill, you can do it like this. Do it very quickly, and if you vary the value, you can get some different effects. This would obviously kind of dead looking grasses because they're brown. But you can see that now could look like it's behind the brow of a hill. So we could, you know, even put in something here, and those are now over the top of the hill. And the other thing that a rigger is excellent for is doing a tree. And I'll do that with a bigger brush to begin with, and then we can go finer and do some of those flicks. So this is just a very quick and dirty little tree. Happy little tree. And then this is how you would put on those smaller branches. Can you see I'm just sort of doing this flicking stroke, and it helps to give the tree some, here's a broken off one down there, some more. I'm trying not to get myself in the way of the camera. There we go. And then the other thing that you can do with that, so that's just a very quick and dirty tree, but there's another stroke now called a stipple, which is kind of like pointillism, and you can see I'm just putting some, I don't know, it could be little tiny buds or leaves, and that can make your tree much more realistic looking. I do have some more examples over here, and if you get your trunk put in first and wait until the shine has just gone, you can do exactly these strokes that I've just demonstrated, but you can do it with your nail or with a pocket knife. And I could demo that, but I'll come back to that in a sec. It has to dry a little bit. And then there's another stroke, there's a tick and flick, but it's more like a sideways stroke. And I do this one with a bristle brush, surround. You could do it with the flat, but we'll talk about flats in a second. So let's get some coniferous color. And it has to be a little bit drier. And so I usually create a little cross at the top. And as you come down, so we go from more of a smile to straighter strokes. So let's do another. And oh, this one may be the right wetness now, so you can use your nail, you see, to create those effects, or you can use a little palette knife, and here I'll do the down strokes for the tops of the grasses, and a few more. So that could be like in the front of the tree. So we've got quite a few strokes in here, the tick or flick, with the rigger showing all the different branches. Then we can do stippling, which can be leaves. Here I've shown stippling as maybe this is a little swarm of bees coming in. Just be careful you don't do them all so close and so regular that they look like bullet fire coming in, because bees don't fly like that, nor do birds. And then this is another little example done over with extra paint on top. For flat brushes, my favorite workhorse is the 1-inch flat. I do use a larger one for larger paintings. These two are blends. I think this is Pony, this is Squirrel. And then I've got a 3/4 inch synthetic and a 3/4 inch bristle. So those are my most common ones. There are many other varieties, but you can try those out and figure out which one you personally like. Why do we need a flat versus a round? Mostly it's for doing large areas, washes particularly, and I covered that in a previous video. So now for what a flat brush can do. It can do pretty much what a pointed one can do, and you can do everything from thin linear strokes. You can do obviously a curvilinear stroke. But what a flat one can do is obviously a nice wide stroke. So I need to get a little darker. So this is me just showing how to do a couple of bricks on a little tiny variegated wash. And the washes I covered in the third video. So here's just a quickie example of doing some bricks. And the other stroke that is kind of nice with a flat brush is double loading, and so literally I'm just putting paint on one side and then on the other, wiggling and jiggling them together, and you can do this stroke where you literally can twist, and it gives some nice sort of ribbon effect, something you can't do with a round brush. And the other thing that you can do is using the same brush, I can do a chisel effect, but you can create the effect of a fence that's falling over. And I have some better examples over here. This is me showing how to do windows with a slightly smaller brush. This is a number 10 flat. And then this was me doing some twisting strokes with different size. This is half inch, 1/4 inch, and then this was the double loaded. Here's the little fence. It looks like something the wind blew over. And then other strokes that you can do is scumbling, but this was lifting out a few little clouds. And here's scumbling a tree. Dabbed's not so great because it tends to leave little triangles, but certainly you can do the rocking backwards and forwards, sort of flicking, tick and flick thing. It tends to make grasses that are a little bit thick, although you can buy a more of a comb brush, which is not coming to me. Here's something like this, which can make grasses, but you can equally well do that with a bristle brush. If I can get some paint, my brush is a little dry, and that will make some grasses, so very similar. And then stippling can give you some nice things too, and it's the same as kind of a sponge brush might do. This I rather like for foliage or even flowers. for watching. I hope you learned something, and if you like my video and want to see more, please consider donating to Patreon at the link below. If you'd like to see some of my artwork, check out my website at the link above. And if you have any questions, please contact me at sallymenning@gmail.com.